Commissioner George Hartwick III, Dauphin County, member of the Human Service Policy Committee, and specifically the chairman for the subcommittee that made a proposal on September 26 to the administration on complete system reform, everything from the Milwaukee wraparound to regulatory relief and an overall way to reform the human service system to be able to reduce the ability to have future costs play out in the DPW budget. In the process of establishing the concept of a subcommittee and proposal, we work really hard on our platform position here in CCAP. We have a series of 13 non-negotiables that talked about what specifically the counties would need to have in order for us to be able to consider a block grant proposal.
Can you share some of those at this point?
One of the critical ones was you're not going to take money out of one system and pit other systems against that system to reduce programs and ultimately not see system reform happen. In this process, the governor and the secretary of DPW have literally stripped the base funding from our mental health system because it's the area that the state has the most flexibility in being able to not tie up significant amounts of federal dollars. But they will be able to take out direct state funds. And in a county like Dauphin County, where we've just as recent as 6 years ago had major transition of folks from our state hospitals, we have about 12.3 of our 18 million in base funding wrapped up in the CHIP program, which is not the CHIP health insurance program.
Right.
It's our state hospital transition program that has funded the ability for us to maintain community-based programs that have served individuals who have come from the state hospital institutions. We've done that, seen improvements in the clients, and we've done it for about $150 a day, not the close to $590 a day it costs to keep people in the state institutions. So the key fact is the state literally saved hundreds of millions in transitioning folks from the state hospital, not to mention the ability to gain leases and additional revenues up at the state hospital levels.
Well, could these individuals go back into the state hospitals if they need to?
Well, our clear plan is to close community-based programs, and it's going to clearly cost the state literally millions of dollars more to be able to deal with institutional care. And the problem is, we don't want to see folks with this serious level of mental illness be in our prison systems. And there's a decision being made by this administration and by the Department of Public Welfare that'll reverse the trend of Pennsylvania being viewed as the state that's most progressive at getting people out of institutional care and putting them into more of a community-based care system where they're able to engage in their families, receive significantly better one-on-one treatment, and do it at less of a cost to taxpayers. This, in essence, will turn us 50 years back to the progress that we've made, not to mention the devastating impact and potentially lives that could be at risk because of these decisions.
Let me ask you a question. You've got about 14 weeks until the budget is supposed to be passed, and at that point the block grant is beginning to be implemented by counties. Do you think counties can do this in 14 weeks?
First of all, they can't do it in 14 weeks. Second of all, don't refer to it as a block grant. That's not what this is. A block grant keeps level funding at the conditions we talked about and the ability to reduce the future liability of both the state, federal government, and counties because we've had real system reform and integration. That's not what we're talking about here. This has been packaged as a block grant, but it basically has decimated five areas of the 7 areas of funding were all directed towards mental health-based funding and other mental health and homeless assistance programs. It decimates the mental health system and turns other funding sources that have been very successful in changing system reform and pitting it against the mental health system. And in Dauphin County alone, if we were to put every dollar from this supposed block grant just back into our mental health system, we'd still be $1.8 million short. This is not a block grant. This is a phony disguise and a way to cut the state budget and pass the buck on to county taxpayers and have people's lives in jeopardy in the process.
So the real decision making then, if this goes through, is going to be placed on the county commissioners. You're the ones who are going to have to decide what programs to cut, what funds to...
I, for one, as one county commissioner, will not stand for this block grant as it's presented. We are going to continue to fight. If the state wants to make the decision about reducing funding so significantly, they're going to have to tell us what residents we're not supposed to serve, because there are going to be beds closed and there's going to be residents that are not served. We're not going to expose ourselves to liability and lawsuits for the ability to determine who's going to get served and who's not. The state's still going to primarily be responsible for it. They want to talk seriously about system reform and reducing future exposure and starting the spending trends in the opposite direction. And by the way, all 7 funding sources that have been grouped in the block grant, those dollars have been decreasing over the last 8 years. Every single one of those areas. They're not the areas of the growth. If you want to talk about conservative ideology, and if you want to take a look at really what bureaucracy is like, DPW received a raise for general government operations. When I'm taking a look at what we're supposed to be doing with direct service provision, I take a look at internal staff cuts to be able to maximize our ability to put money into direct services. The state needs to take an internal look and to be able to really right-size DPW staffing and budget before they look at county-based programs. On top of this, they want to ship 1,000 state parolees back to the communities that are now going to be stripped from safety net mental health and drug and alcohol services, the same services we've used to try to divert people out of prison. Absent the ability to have those services, with 1,000 more inmates and our jail population ticking up, where do you see the collateral expenses that happen to county taxpayers and state government?
One last question. Your colleague, Christian Leinbach from Berks County, said this morning that what happened to the $400 million in waste, fraud, and abuse? And is this the waste, fraud, and abuse they're trying to get at, or what is it?
They're saying our programs represent waste, fraud, and abuse. When I'm talking about 20 staff members in a mental health department dealing with over 9,400 clients and being the last place of resort from the courts to be able to keep them out of institutional care, no amount of regulatory relief is going to help us when you strip community services. They took out $400 million in waste, fraud, and abuse. And when I was asking representatives from DPW, how much does that represent in your $10.6 billion budget? They couldn't even tell you. It represents cash assistance and food stamps as less than 6% of their overall budget. They're talking as if that is pervasive throughout all of the DPW service system. It's not about people standing in line for food stamps. This is about child and senior services, about the ability to take care of the mentally disabled, intellectual disabilities, and folks with mental health issues. Don't get it confused. We want to see waste, fraud, and abuse be taken out at all levels of government. As a matter of fact, we have been able to do that successfully in our areas. They've been able to identify less than 40 million out of the 400 million they've targeted in waste, fraud, and abuse, and even those numbers are sketchy. Let's not have more unrealistic plans that are not thought out, you don't understand the impact, and to see, actually, for a pound foolish and a penny wise, you actually cost the state literally hundreds of millions of dollars, not to mention reversing back a system that has moved forward out of institutional care and having devastating impact on families' lives and people who need services the most. Let's figure out a way to really reduce bureaucracy and take a look at DPW as a department, not take a look at community-based county services. They're being run very well.